All right, hello everyone. Hope everyone's having a good day so far. So today I'm going to be talking about case study number 9, which is basically the need to improve agricultural extension programs for women farmers in Kenya. Now, to give you guys a brief summary of what the case study entails, I'm just going to jump right into it here. So basically, this case study speaks to the relationship of absolute poverty being disproportionately concentrated to that of women who live in rural areas and are found to work in the agricultural sector. It is noted that one of the key roles of women in sub-Saharan Africa is their presence in the production and the harvesting of agricultural goods, not only as a means of income for themselves and their families, but also to provide for their families and their communities as well. Now, this case speaks of agricultural extension programs such as the Green Revolution, which consists of a transition to high-yielding crop varieties and the introduction of forms of more modern farming practices, which typically will have a high impact on farmers' abilities to produce goods in rural environments found in developing nations, such as Asian countries or countries in South America. It has been very successful, but this really isn't the case when it comes to Kenya. And this is due to various cultural practices that are based around the unequal distribution of human capital, workloads, and productivity inputs between the sexes. Now, the case study presents that within Kenya, women are responsible for well over 2/3 of the production of agricultural goods, yet are still faced with an unequal distribution of education, equipment, and land ownership to that of their male counterparts. It is found that most extension and education programs that are currently present in Kenya have been presented to the men who work in the agricultural industry with the thought that they would then pass on the newfound knowledge and experience to their spouses and female colleagues. However, traditionally this has not really been the case in Kenya. It has become evident that in order to overcome the limitations of production and in turn reduce the overall poverty levels for people in Kenya, that the success of women in the agricultural sector is imperative. Now, this case is going to introduce 5 different key issues that basically hinder female farmers from their abilities to improve their production capabilities. And these 5 key issues include human capital, appropriate technology, land reform, credit, or I should say the access to credit, as well as the work requirement distribution between men and women in Kenya. So the impact that these issues have caused have hindered Kenya's ability to pull female farmers out of impoverished situations, which has resulted in the need to basically restructure and create new agricultural extension programs that are directed at facilitating a more equal distribution of education and resources to both genders. So at this point, we're going to transition over to talking about the 5 different key issues in rural development. All right, guys. So like I mentioned before, now we're going to start speaking about the 5 different key issues that are inhibiting the rural development of women in Kenya. So basically, the first of which is being the lack of human capital found within the female population. So the case study states that women have less education than men on average in more rural developing areas. This inequality of human capital is then multiplied through a bias in which available agricultural programs will typically focus on training the more educated spouse in a couple, with hopes that the information provided will then be trickled across to their partner. This, however, seldom happens, which only fuels the problem moving forward. If women in Kenya who currently live in rural situations had better access to education, it is likely that there would not only be an increase in development and quality of life, but they would also likely have a higher chance of being selected to participate in the extension programs that are currently present. The second key issue, which is presented through the case, is the lack of appropriate technology in which women have access to in order to perform their agricultural duties. So it is often found in Kenyan agricultural practices that the duties of each sex will perform is not only segregated based on gender, but also the access to appropriate equipment to perform these duties will also be segregated based on gender as well. So with the focus of technology development being directed towards men, it is difficult for women taking part in agricultural activities to boost their productivity past levels of basically just hands-on manual labor. So without access to, say, tractors or proper tills, it's very hard for these women to overcome the barriers of just hands-on labor, say with a shovel or a spade, whatever it might be. Now, a third key issue is the distribution of land reform in agrarian design. It is said that on average, women farm on much smaller, more fragmented plots of land than men, and are less likely to have secure ownership and will often cultivate less fertile soil. So this inequality in land distribution is a key player in inhibiting the development of female farmers. Without ownership of fertile plots of land, it is almost impossible for these farmers to create profits substantial enough to save and expand further than their current means. So this lack of access to more suitable soil also prevents female farmers from producing crops commonly known as cash crops, which could essentially help boost their income moving forward, but also limits their production to that of traditional crops, which are essentially only suitable to meet the sustenance demands for themselves and their families. So it's very hard for them to create crops that will create a boosted income for them to basically then over time save and then eventually hopefully buy more fertile plots of land. They're very limited in what they're able to produce. The fourth key issue which is presented in the case is the lack of access to credit for female farmers. So it is found that women in Kenya have very little, if any, access to financial credit to help boost their ability to produce. Without this access to credit, it puts women at an inherent disadvantage in their agricultural activities compared to that of their male counterparts and the male competition that they face. Tying this issue back to some of the previous challenges, without having access to this credit to leverage their financial capabilities, women are often unable to even go out and make purchases of large equipment that might help in their production, but they're also unable to make purchases of more fertile land, which really inhibits these women from moving forward and increasing their productivity in their agricultural services. Now, the final issue that is presented in the case study is the difference in work requirements between that of men and women. It is brought forth that in Kenya, many women work as many or more hours per day as men in agricultural pursuits, and they also have to perform several hours of domestic work that men do not. With this being stated, it is not uncommon that the workday of a female African farmer, the hours that they're going to work during the day reach upwards of 16 to 19 hours per day, which leaves very minimal time for them to rest and prepare for the next day of work, or even just to recuperate and enjoy times for themselves. This unequal distribution of domestic work leaves female farmers unable to properly balance their farming duties, unable to balance their agricultural and domestic workloads, and often leaves them having to make sacrifices in their farming duties to ensure that there's proper care for their families back at home. So this inequality of domestic labor leaves an underlying implication for change, in which that women should likely receive a higher priority for technical education and development than that of their male counterparts, who really don't have to take part in these domestic duties. So on average, men not only are given higher access to education and equipment, they work reduced hours compared to that of their female counterparts, even in agricultural pursuits. But at the end of the day, men typically don't even take part in domestic requirements, such as taking care of the home or the children, or cooking food or washing clothes. Whereas women who work the same amount of hours, if not longer, will actually have to take care of these duties as well. Now, these are the 5 key issues that the case study presents, and moving forward, we're going to transition into basically the role of women empowerment in rural work located in Kenya. Okay, back to our original position here. So basically, when it comes to the role of women empowerment in rural work, it has been found that the impact of the current agricultural extension programs have actually begun to experience diminishing returns, as the results have basically only had a focus on male farmers. which has fueled a bit of a paradigm shift to a more encompassing look on education and facilitation. So, such as the introduction of the Kenyan Training and Visit Program, or T&V for short. This program basically focuses on an express purpose of training women as well as men in efficient and equal agricultural practices. This program focuses on providing technical messages and education to contact farmers who are basically selected in communities as being capable, revered, and accountable in their ability to not only practice the lessons that they are being taught and being approached with, but also through regular site visits and being involved in their community can also be used as educators to other farmers in their communities. So these technical messages that are being relayed to contact farmers begin with simple teachings such as things like ground preparation, the difference in seed varieties, it could be pruning, basically very simple tasks or information that is going to be easy for not only these contact farmers to initially introduce to their own farming practices, but are easy to relay on to their fellow farmers and colleagues in the sector as well. And basically, the goal of this plan is to start small and then to start working towards more complex lessons over time, as these contact farmers prove successful in their ability to relay the information to the greater population. So basically, through women becoming contact farmers and educating their fellow females in the agricultural sector, it has been found that women have increased their ability to not only to produce agricultural products, but have effectively overcome the levels of diminishing returns traditionally found in these agricultural extension programs as well. Now, in regards to diminishing returns, it in a traditional sense, it means that these extension programs would have essentially only been gifted to the men in Kenyan society, and over time the return on the investment began to dwindle, whereas with a new approach to it involving a lot of women in these extension programs, it's overcome that basically the law of diminishing returns. In fact, the economic advancement of women farmers has also been found to be important in the promotion of environmentally sustainable development as well. It's brought forth in the case study that in addition to the responsibility for agriculture, especially on more marginal and often ecologically fragile lands, women will actually have a customary role in traditional societies as the guardians of natural resources, such as the water supply. So not only through educating these women farmers on practices that they can use on their own farmland, they're becoming role models in the preservation of natural resources and different areas within their community as well. So this strategy of involving women in the education process, as well as empowering them in environmentally sustainable practices, has shown great results in public agricultural initiatives. It is quoted in the case study by the United Nations Population Fund that women are now the principal participants in Kenya's National Soil Conservation Program. Since the mid-1980s, women have terraced more than 360,000 small farms, which accounts to basically 40% of the country's total farmland. And rural collectives run by women are now getting bank loans and agricultural extension services that are tailored specifically to their needs. So it's shown that through this development in basically women's empowerment and education and experience, that they're beginning to overcome these 5 key issues that were typical to preventing women from, overcoming impoverished situations and improving their own development. Now, as far as the results of this empowerment goes, empowering women has been a key role in improving the development of Kenya and helping to reduce the level of its citizens that currently live in absolute poverty levels. Just from looking at the movement of women into empowered roles such as those found in the Kenyan National Soil Conservation Program, it is evident that these women who would have been traditionally taken advantage of have been given an opportunity to create real change for themselves and for their community members in their nation. So The case presents a report conducted by the Women in Development Services of the FAO, which states that in Kenya, following a national information campaign targeted at women under the National Extension Project, that the yields of corn have increased by 28%, the yield of beans has increased by 80%, and the yield of potatoes has increased by roughly 84%. So these increases in national crop productions are actually directly related to the increase of education and assistance that has been made available to women in the agricultural industry in Kenya. So basically, the empowerment of women has begun to show real results and real change for not only women in Kenya, but for their society as a whole. Rather than traditional means of very male-dominated industry, through empowering women, it has not only created change in their crop yields and the ability for women to overcome these 5 key issues, but has created a better overall landscape for all Kenyan people, basically as a whole. Now, the empowerment of women has also seen them strengthen their roles found within society, such as the movement of thousands of women taking part in the Green Belt Movement, or GBM for short, which was established in 1977 by the Council of Women in Kenya. With the Green Belt Movement basically has a focus on halting desertification through the use of planting trees, as well as water and soil conservation. The same movement has also made strides in the promotion of sustainable development and poverty alleviation through parallel projects, I should say, that they produce and govern. So it's clear that through the empowerment of women in Kenya, not only in the agricultural sector, but as contributors to society as well, that it has not only increased their productivity, but has increased the quality of life for Kenyan people as a whole. Now, this case study has had a great focus on the importance of equality as a means of not only empowering women, but as a means of reducing poverty levels in developing nations and improving sustainable development alike. Essentially, that entails what the case study number 9 encompasses, and I look forward to all of the questions that you guys have for me moving forward. Hope everyone has a great day. Bye now.